Now we are coming to the keynote, and of course keynote has to be from Ukraine. But also the keynote today is a legend, a person legend, I would say, because of the huge achievements that Mr. Abromavičius has in both business, as an investor, and as a politician, as a person who is bringing about change, who brought about change in the business circles in the Baltics, who brought about change in Ukraine, and who has kindly agreed to speak to us about his outlook of the first-hand outlook of the situation in Ukraine and the way forward there, and how we can help. Mr. Aivaras Abromavičius.
Sit down.
Yeah, you take a seat.
Maybe I need this for some slides later, no?
I think they will be automatic.
They will be automatic, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Vilius, for invitation. Yesterday I was at a startup conference in Vilnius, and I felt like it was not my cup of tea because I had to dress down, no tie, and now back to normal. 26 years ago, I got my first job on my 20th birthday as the first non-Estonian employee at Hansa Bank. Even Wikipedia page, once it was created, it said Lithuanian banker. It seems like I belong to this conference. I have been working with Swedes from 1999. For Swedes or with Swedes, still at the moment. I'm a majority shareholder of a fairly large farm in Ukraine, which is 41,000 hectares, and my large minority partners are from Sweden. So a successful cooperation there. So I'm Lithuanian. I grew up here. 300 meters from here was my high school where I was going. So this area is pretty much familiar to me, less developed back then. But then I accidentally became Ukrainian. I accidentally became Minister of Ukraine, 25th Minister of Ukraine. They had average length of stay a bit less than 11 months. I stayed 500 days, which is almost a year and a half, so I managed to extend that average length of stay as a minister. Then I accidentally met Zelensky, supported him, and then he asked me to run a state-owned defense company, so I accidentally became part of the defense system of Ukraine, 56,000 people, 136 companies. So I had made also a small contribution to success of that, because it was myself with two other signatories that put Neptune cruise missile into the use of Ukrainian armed forces, which I think it has been not superly confirmed, but hit the Moskva cruise ship. And then in 2007, I accidentally became a farmer. And my wife has been a CEO for 12 years, and I am chairman, and this is what I do most of the time. Nowadays, I am involved in farming because after my last stint with the government of Ukraine as the CEO of Ukroboronprom, that was October 2020, I promised my wife to stay away from political appointments for at least 10 years. Less stress, among other things, more liberties, private liberties, among other things. But maybe when I grow older, I'll do something again, but not at the moment.
Yes, but of course, and your story is really, I mean, so after you finish your 10 years from politics, you'll be able to run for the president of Lithuania, I hope.
Well, that's also something. I like politics very much, so I would like to help. I was discussing today with the mayor of Vilnius because he's lighting his book, memoirs or whatever, and I was asked to run for the mayor of Vilnius once upon a time, and I said, but I'm more interested in Kiev, and they said, first Vilnius, then Kiev. but my wife did not agree to come and live in Vilnius, and we agreed long time ago that in a marriage of people from two different countries, for me it's better to live where your wife is from, or at least in a neutral territory, because I'm used to traveling over 100 days on business everywhere around the world, since the days at East Capital, so it's much better if she's comfortable with the family situation, and I can always go to a tennis club and find some friends and so on. So after 2 stints in the government, I like the job. It's very challenging, but that's not something I would contemplate. I think it's a job that most of the people eventually don't appreciate. You do good things, but eventually, who cares, so to say? So it takes some nerves to do that job, and many people don't understand how much stress comes with it.
Well, that's an occasion to say thanks to people who are doing that job
exactly.
right now
Exactly.
in this audience.
Exactly. And I think that overall Baltic banking system is developing in a very sort of a positive way, and I continue to be involved in the banking sector. Yesterday, our startup here called GoIndex received a license to manage pension fund money. So a similar story, success story in Estonia is called Tuleva. In Latvia is Indexo, and we, with same people behind these two companies, made a startup called GoIndex, which will challenge our dear friends from SEB and Swedbank in terms of pension fund management. So I can confirm with the National Bank of Lithuania and Ministry of Finance that the licensing process was a bit longer than expected, but ended successfully.
Okay, let's talk about Ukraine. And of course, you have, I'll probably not be wrong if I say that this audience is probably quite an expert of news from Ukraine. We read news from Ukraine every morning, as most people around this region. And this is, we read them in various languages, but still you have first-hand knowledge. So how do you see Ukrainian economy? How does it? How is Ukraine now economically?
Yeah. So obviously, February 23 has divided our lives into 3 different periods. Before February 23, now, during the war, and what happens afterwards. And somebody touched base on that a little bit already. So what I say, since I lived in Moscow between 2005 and 2008, when I was establishing East Capital Office, there was not a single positive coverage of Ukraine on Russian state television already then. So all those appeasers like Kissinger or the French or the Germans that keep saying that maybe if Ukraine listened in December what Russians were saying, it's all incorrect. Russia has been preparing their audience for atrocities, for violence, for brutality, for annexation for years. So that's why they're completely brainwashed. That's why they support all these cruelties and so on. And we need to understand that. And if they are not stopped now, obviously they will continue. Because all this bravado that Russia is about winning, needs to be stopped here and now. And there's no better possibility for the West to use Ukraine, supply it with unlimited amount of heavy weaponry to stop Russians where they are now. In terms of what is happening now, unfortunately, in the coming days, the news flow is going to be negative. So Ukrainian forces that are not receiving heavy weapons as quickly as we all thought they would, because there has been massive amount of announcements in the West, including US, the Lend-Lease, that equipment will come quick. It is not. And Russians understand that they have maybe a month and a half, maybe even less, before all this equipment arrives. So they are like striking with all they have as hard as possible, trying to encircle in smaller sort of cities, and the news flow in the coming days for Ukraine is going to be bad. And then what happens after the war? Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs, has stated that victory for Ukraine means 4 things: liberation of all territories, reparations, And then the third war crime sort of investigation and tribunal, and fourth, European integration of Ukraine. So it's very disappointing to hear again all these French ministers of European affairs who say it's going to take 15 to 20 years for Ukraine to become a full member of EU. I mean, this is not how you work with strategic communications during the time of war. I mean, maybe he needs to take some course in that or whatever. You encourage by saying we will put full support behind you, not discouraged by this type of actions, because people in Kiev, people on the front line, they want to know that everyone is doing their bit. Someone is supplying weapons, someone is doing the financial support, someone is doing even psychological support. So that's not positive, but hopefully that will improve, because Russia, as we know, overestimated their own strength, underestimated Ukrainian strength, and underestimated Western unity, because it's unprecedented as well. These are actually the photos from our farm. So this was a month ago when we were preparing actually our soil for planting, for sowing, and in one day we collected 9 missiles. From our fields. Our fields, a third is around Borispol Airport. So when you land in Kiev during peaceful times, all the cornfields around that are ours. So we can say Lithuanian, or partially Swedish, and so on. This is Smerch, most likely unexploded. So you put some kind of localized detonation with the help of military guys, and you blow it up. And another one, and this is called Uragan. It has about 30 explosives, and they all explode about 10 meters before the target. And obviously this is somewhere 20 kilometers from Kiev, so Russia has a lot of high precision missiles that they fire from Black Sea or Caspian Sea, from planes or submarines, but this is clearly not one of those. This is old stuff. They have still a lot of it. They kind of fire wherever indiscriminately, destroying whatever. And this is in Chernigov, first days of war. Russians came from the north. And these are our employees, actually, with our company is called AgroRegion, with our yellow logos, part of territorial defense. We just bumped into abandoned Russian vehicle called Tor. This is an anti-aircraft sort of a defense system, mobile one, price tag between $10 and $12 million. I don't know if they ran out of fuel or they leaked the fuel not to go into the battlefield or engine jammed or whatever. Obviously, we recovered it and gave it to our military. And this is just how much Russians left of ammunition on the fields as well. So these are the daily things of what farmer is experiencing. And in the coming weeks, of course, you will see a lot of debate about shipping Ukrainian grain out to the world markets. And Gabrielius Landsbergis thankfully picked up this initiative very much and is pushing for the reopening of the Black Sea, because Ukraine would export in normal times up to 5 million tons a month of grain. Now, last month, 1 million tons. Maybe this month is going to be 1.5 million tons. And in 1.5 months, we have new harvest. And we still have 18 million tons of old harvest stuck in silos. So it's going to be very challenging. We have equipment, we have inputs, everyone more or less planted, but it's difficult to get out. So in a few months' time, all the farming companies in Ukraine will have cash flow problems, and it will affect next year's planting plans, which means that food prices will remain elevated. Poor countries will continue to suffer. They will continue to blame NATO and US for creating food prices, not Russia, because we're not winning communications war with less developed countries. So it is critically important to reopen Black Sea for Ukrainian grain, take food prices down, take inflationary risks down, so that people start breathing a bit easier. Otherwise, Russian plan is very much drag out the war until winter, when everyone in Western Europe sees high utility bills and says maybe it's time to take sanctions away. They don't work. Ukraine is great, but we're a bit tired of supporting Ukraine because it costs us economically and so on. So we need to obviously keep the level of communications, very professional, constant at a high level. And here, Zelensky's experience, from his previous life is really, really working, because you see how Ukraine is still in the top headlines of the main media outlets. First, he was speaking to the parliaments of individual countries, then leaders of other countries spoke to Ukrainian parliament, then all these foreign dignitaries started to visit Kiev, and it was Angelina Jolie and all the other Hollywood superstars coming, and U2 and so on. So here Ukraine is doing an excellent job in very challenging circumstances.
So you spoke about opening the Black Sea. How realistic is that? Do you see that? I mean, is how much there is like political pressure on Russia, and how much it is realistic to really use some military thing to open it?
Well, Russia doesn't care. I mean, there are no red lines that it has not crossed already. So basically, the only real solution is to get Western help to demine the equatorium of the Black Sea, because Ukraine particularly, but Russia also, but particularly Ukraine, put a lot of floating mines, 400, so that Russia does not make the so-called amphibious attack on Odessa, first of all. So you need to use British and Turkish minesweepers to clear the waters, and then you need to put NATO ships to guard the convoys with grain, to leave the ports. Russia is obviously demanding lifting full or partial lift of sanctions, which is not going to happen. And now there is obviously this debate. But after evacuation, we don't know yet the end result of Azovstal, sort of civilian people and fighters. There is some sort of a hope that you can negotiate something with Russians. So I remain hopeful, but this is not a quick fix. We also hear debates about sending Ukrainian grain via rail through Belarusian territory to Klaipeda, because then you don't need to change the wheels, because the rail tracks are the same, Ukraine, Belarus and Lithuania. But again, that means lifting some sanctions from Belarus for potash fertilizer export, and that's also like a very big political decision, because the counterparty that we're dealing with in Belarus is untrustworthy person that can change, the conditions of a deal anytime.
Yeah. Okay, so well, the time is flying when you speak. So, but I still wanted to ask this question. So, you know situation, and you've have a lot of experience in Ukraine, and you have a lot of experience in business. So, can you tell us, well, if we look 5 years ahead, how does Ukraine look?
In 5 years ahead, Ukraine shall be an absolutely European country, where every investor would like to come and invest, use the opportunity of that is rebuilding. Ukraine has had a lot of chances in the past. Let's be frank. Orange Revolution 2004, 2014 when Poroshenko came, the first president to win in the first round. Then Zelensky's victory, completely non-standard politician. So there was a lot of hope, and not every time hopes were fulfilled. But I clearly see that it's the only country that is dying for the right to be part of the European family, and it requires every single support it can receive. So if most of you already have done something for Ukraine, you can do more. And there are very obvious ways how to support, including hosting Ukrainian families, supporting them. Then we have Blue and Yellow Foundation here of Jonas Soman, which is doing phenomenal job, and thank you very much for contribution. Come Back Alive Ukrainian initiative has raised even 4 times as much money, and also super effective. And as of yesterday, we hear Mr. Tapinas raising money for Bayraktar drone. I have been 3 times in the factory of Bayraktar, top-notch equipment, best of class in the world, most battlefield tested of any drones in the world, and Ukraine needs them. So through corporate donation initiatives, privately, I urge you to continue supporting Ukraine in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aivarai. Our time is up, and thank you very much for this outlook. It's really great to hear from you, and I think we'd like to listen more, but we have also other speakers, so thank you for making the time to come. And I hope that this Bayraktar Foundation will be filled up quite a lot during this day with so many business leaders in the room listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ačiū labai.